Welcome to Libyth. I'm glad you're here. This week we are in Edo period Japan with the Hagakure, the Book of the Samurai. Today we close the week with the ideas, the themes underneath the Hagakure, and what they leave us with. We've read the Hagakure, looked at how its text is built, and sat with the figures who carry it. Today I want to go to the deepest layer, the ideas. What does this book actually believe? And where do its beliefs pull against each other in ways the text cannot resolve? The Hagakure's central claim is this: the problem with human beings is that they are too attached to their own continuation. That attachment, the desire to survive, to be comfortable, to protect what they have built, is the source of all hesitation, all calculation, all failure to act with complete commitment when complete commitment is required. The solution Tsunetomo proposes is the deliberate cultivation of death acceptance, a daily practice of imagining yourself already dead, so that the fear of death and the anxiety of self-preservation that runs beneath all human calculation is progressively dissolved. A person who is already dead in their own mind is free in a specific and paradoxical way. They have nothing left to protect. They can act. That is the positive version of the philosophy. Hold it alongside the negative version, that a samurai who hesitates is already lost. That deliberation is a symptom of insufficient commitment, that the quality of an act matters more than its consequences, and you have the full shape of the Hagakure's thought. Let's trace the 5 themes we named at the beginning of the week and see what the text actually does with each of them. The first theme, radical loyalty versus personal freedom. The Hagakure resolves this apparent tension by dissolving one of its terms. Tsunetomo does not believe in personal freedom as something to be weighed against loyalty. He believes that what we call personal freedom, the domain of individual desire, individual ambition, individual self-expression, is a kind of prison. A person who is pursuing their own satisfaction is a person in constant negotiation with the world. What can I get from this situation? How can I protect what I have? What is the best outcome for me? That constant negotiation is what Tsunetomo means by being controlled by the self. And his prescription is not less freedom, but more. A different kind of freedom, the freedom of a person who has stopped calculating because there is nothing left to calculate for. This is philosophically coherent. It has close relatives in Buddhism, in Stoicism, in the Christian tradition of kenosis, self-emptying as the precondition of genuine love. The idea that self-interest is a form of bondage, and that release from self-interest is a form of freedom, has been independently arrived at by enough traditions that it deserves to be taken seriously. The tension the Hagakure cannot resolve. This dissolution of the self works when what you are loyal to is genuinely worthy of it. Tsunetomo was loyal to a man he had known for 30 years, a man whose character he trusted, a man who, by Tsunetomo's own account, actively cared about the well-being of those who served him. The philosophy is built for that specific context. Apply it to an institution that does not deserve unconditional loyalty, to a state, to a corporation, to a movement whose goals cannot withstand scrutiny, and the same internal logic that produces selfless service produces complicity. The Hagakure has no safeguard against this. It cannot build one, because to build it would require the kind of prior evaluation and conditional commitment that the philosophy explicitly rejects. This is not a theoretical danger. It is the danger that materialized when the Hagakure was adopted by the Japanese military state in the 1930s as a philosophical foundation for the demand of total loyalty to the emperor. The text was not responsible for that adoption, but it provided the raw material. The second theme, death acceptance as mental conditioning. The practice Tsunetomo describes morning meditation on the various ways you might die today, is one of the most psychologically interesting aspects of the Hagakure, and it is the aspect most separable from the feudal loyalty context. The philosophical value of death awareness has been established independently by traditions with nothing to do with samurai culture. The Stoic practice of negative visualization, imagining the loss of everything you value, including your life, as a way of intensifying your appreciation of the present, is functionally similar to Tsunetomo's morning death meditation. The Buddhist practice of Maranasati, mindfulness of death, has a 2,500-year history and an extensive body of practical instruction around the same core insight. That regular contemplation of mortality reduces fear of death, increases presence, and clarifies what actually matters. Modern research in existential psychology, beginning with Viktor Frankl and developed through terror management theory, has confirmed that people who achieve what the psychologists call death acceptance tend to be more fully engaged with life rather than less. Tsunetomo arrives at the same conclusion through a different path. His insight is that death anxiety is the invisible weight that makes all other anxiety heavier. A person who is afraid to die is afraid of loss, afraid of failure, afraid of judgment, afraid of all the small and large risks that life requires taking. A person who has made peace with death is, paradoxically, lighter. They can take the risks. They can act without the constant background calculation of whether this might be the thing that finishes them. The pushback. There is a line between accepting your own mortality and treating your life as expendable at someone else's direction. Tsunetomo conflates these, and the conflation is where the philosophy goes most wrong. Death acceptance as a personal practice, the cultivation of equanimity in the face of your own finitude, is genuinely valuable and has been validated across cultures and centuries. Death acceptance as an institutional requirement, the demand that you be ready to give your life at any moment on behalf of an organization or a person, is something different. It is the psychological state that institutions exploit, from military service to the various secular and religious cult dynamics that demand total commitment. The meditation that begins as liberation can, in the wrong context, become preparation for exploitation. The third theme, identity defined by duty. The Hagakure's answer to the question of who you are is unambiguous. You are your function in the social order, and that function is your primary identity. Not your desires. Not your private character. Not the inner life you do not show to the world. Your role, performed with complete commitment, is what you are. This is identity as pure exteriority, not self-expression, but self-disappearance into function. That position is so far from the contemporary understanding of identity that it initially sounds simply wrong. We live in a culture organized around the authentic self, the inner true nature that personal development is supposed to uncover, and that self-expression is supposed to communicate. The idea that your real self is your function, your role, your contribution to the social order rather than your private inner truth, sounds like a recipe for alienation and self-betrayal. But Tsunetomo's position is more nuanced than it first appears. He is not saying that the inner life is irrelevant. The Hagakure is full of attention to inner life, to the quality of mind and heart that makes excellent service possible. He is saying that the inner life finds its fullest expression not in private self-cultivation, but in the quality of one's engagement with actual work and actual relationships. You become most fully yourself not by retreating from duty to discover who you really are, but by giving yourself completely to duty until the question of who you really are becomes irrelevant. The distinction between your authentic self and your performed role dissolves. What is left is simple. You are what you do, and what you do is what you are. This has contemporary resonance in unexpected places. The conversation about authenticity in professional life, the tension between being professionally competent and being personally genuine, is partly a failure to imagine that those two things could be the same. The craftsperson who is fully absorbed in excellent work, the teacher who is so present with their students that the question of self-expression never arises, the caregiver whose care is total. In these cases, the Hagakure's model of identity works. It is not that the self has been lost. It is that the self has been concentrated. The fourth theme, discipline as meaning-making. The Hagakure's prescription for the problem of meaning is not philosophical resolution, but daily practice. You do not find meaning by thinking carefully about what matters. You find it by doing the same things with complete attention every day until doing them becomes the meaning. Morning meditation on death. The correct performance of formal greeting. The proper handling of correspondence. The maintenance of the body and the sword. The regular cultivation of the relationships that constitute one's social world. None of these is profound in itself. Together, practiced with full attention and without self-consciousness, they constitute a life that is, in Tsunetomo's account, deeply satisfying in a way that a life of philosophical reflection alone cannot be. This is a genuinely important claim, and it has unexpected parallels in contemporary cognitive science. The research on flow states, the psychology of optimal experience developed by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, found that people report the highest levels of engagement and satisfaction not in rest or leisure, but in skilled activity pursued at the edge of their competence, with clear feedback and complete absorption. That description maps almost perfectly onto what Tsunetomo prescribes: a life of skilled activity, martial, administrative, social, pursued with complete attention, with the self-consciousness dissolved by the demands of the activity. The Hagakure arrived at the psychology of flow by a different path, and 3 centuries earlier. The convergence is striking. The pushback, the meaning that discipline creates, is necessarily the meaning appropriate to the system within which the discipline is practiced. Tsunetomo's daily practices produce a samurai. They would not produce a poet, or a farmer, or a nurse. The meaning that routine creates is not universal meaning, but systemic meaning. The experience of being competent and committed within a particular role in a particular social order. This is genuinely valuable. But it depends on the social order being worth organizing your life around, and the Hagakure does not ask that question. The fifth theme, the danger of absolutist thinking. This is the theme the Hagakure cannot address, because acknowledging it would require the text to turn its method against itself. Tsunetomo's philosophy is structured around absolutes. Total loyalty. Complete readiness to die. Immediate action without deliberation. No exceptions, no conditions, no prior evaluation. The quality of a commitment is measured by its unconditional character. A loyalty that has conditions attached is not loyalty at all. It is a negotiated arrangement, which is something different. The internal logic is consistent. But a philosophy built on absolutes cannot accommodate the discovery that the absolute was wrong. A person who has committed totally to a lord, to an institution, to an idea, who has dissolved the self in service to that commitment, has no internal mechanism for recognizing that the commitment was misplaced. The very qualities the Hagakure cultivates, the suppression of self-interest, the willingness to act without prior reflection, the dissolution of the calculating mind that asks what this is for, remove the tools that a person would need to notice, and respond to the fact that what they are committed to does not deserve the commitment. This is why the Hagakure was available to the Japanese military state of the 1930s as a philosophical foundation for demands of total loyalty to the emperor. Not because Tsunetomo intended it for that use. Not because the loyalty he described and the loyalty demanded by the imperial state were the same thing. But because the structure of absolute commitment, once divorced from the specific relationship that gave it meaning, becomes available to any institution that wants to make the same demand. The most honest thing we can say about the Hagakure's absolutism: it works in the context for which it was developed, with the person for whom it was developed, in the relationship for which it was developed. Tsunetomo's total loyalty to Mitsushige was an expression of genuine love, genuine admiration, and genuine shared values built over 30 years of close service. In that context, the philosophy produced something genuinely admirable. Outside that context, applied to institutions that have not earned the commitment, to causes that cannot withstand scrutiny, to the demand that you dissolve yourself in service to something you have not fully examined, it produces something dangerous. That gap between the philosophy's specific context and its general application is the thing the Hagakure most needs its readers to supply, and that it cannot supply for itself. Return to where we began. The question of whether total commitment is the loss of yourself or the fullest expression of yourself. After a week with the Hagakure, you do not have a final answer. You have a better question. Committed to what? For what? On whose terms? Examined how? Those questions are what the text cannot ask. They are what you bring to it. And they are, in the end, what make the Hagakure worth reading at all, not as an instruction manual to be followed, but as a mirror that shows, with uncomfortable clarity, what it looks like when a human being gives themselves to something completely. Whether that image is admirable or terrifying depends entirely on what they have given themselves to. That's all for today on Libyth. Next Monday, we begin a new book. If you want to follow the whole journey, subscribe. A new book every week. At least we try.